to believe.
You talk a little louder, Ellie.
We do really feel we belong in the land of Israel, truly, but I guess bitter because like we see what we left and it's hard. So we just, no, harder for me. I don't know, it's a hard call. Okay, I decided to speak to you from my heart. I had no books. I found some of Hannah's books on the shelf, but I decided to share with you some of the thoughts that have been on my mind because I'm in graduate school. I do think I'm ready to retire when I finish. But I'm very excited to be in school for therapy, to become a therapist, something that I've always wanted to do. It's actually really fantastic to go back to graduate school when your kids are grown. I feel very focused on it and I feel like I'm doing what I finally have dreamt of doing. And I want to share with you some thoughts tonight that I'm actually really thinking about that are very much on my mind. However, I've only been in school for about 25 minutes. So if I don't sound like I know what I'm talking about, it's because I don't totally know what I'm talking about. No, I've been a life coach for 12 years. So I'm being self-deprecating as a way of humor, etc. But the truth is that a lot of it is very familiar to me. And I feel so strongly that the things that I'm learning in psychology are so totally intertwined with Judaism, and specifically what we're about to experience in the Pesach Seder. Everything seems so totally intertwined and connected, and it's just very exciting how it's all connected. And I want to start by saying that just at the get-go, there is so much in the Pesach story and in the mitzvah of giving over our exodus from Egypt to our children, what that means. There's so much deep self stuff. It says in the Gemara, in the Talmud, it says, B'chol dor v'dor, in every generation, chayav adam lirot et atzmo k'ilu hu yatsa miMitzrayim. That in every generation, a person is obligated to see themselves as if they left Egypt. I'm going to say it again because it's imperative to, this is a mitzvah, it's imperative to do this. And I think I'm going to give you a little window into how to do this. It's pretty deep and I'm only in the beginning of my studies, but it's something, everything that I'm sharing with you tonight, I'm thinking about a great deal. Hold over door in every generation, it doesn't matter which generation. Today, I am Adam, a person is obligated to see himself as or herself as if she had gone out of Mitzrayim. Now, Mitzrayim is Egypt, of course, but many commentators tell us that etymologically, the words are connected. Mitzrayim, Egypt, is connected to the word Mitzarim, which means deep emotional constriction, the constricted places. So if you shift from Egypt to deep emotional constricted places, then the actual verse says in every generation, when it comes time to Pesach, when it comes time for this time of year, you are obligated to go through some sort of process where you where you move out of the places in your life that you feel totally stuck in. And everybody feels stuck in theirs. Everybody feels like unable to move from certain constricted states, certain ways of thinking, certain sabotaging thoughts, whatever it is, we are actually obligated, it's not a nice thing to do, we're actually obligated to move out of our personal constricted stuckness. Now, what's very interesting is that we talked about it today, David spoke about it today, that the Rambam says that in Mishnah Torah, that even if a person, and we talked about this kind of tongue in cheek, but it actually happened that people really experienced that with COVID, that they were alone. So even if a person, so while it says in Shmot, in Exodus, the Haggadah Lebincha, that you are obligated to tell your children, that you have an obligation to tell your children the story of leaving Egypt, the story of the Exodus. What if you don't have children? And what if you're alone? What if there's nobody there? And the answer is, we learned it today with David, you have to tell it to yourself. Now, if you take these two parts together, that a person has to leave, is obligated to leave what constricts them, and and if nobody's there, they have to do it to, there's no child, then what does it mean? Haggadah to Lebincha. Actually, you said it, Brenda, you said it today. What does it mean? There is a mitzvah of telling your children. What if there are no children? What if there are no children at the table? What if you're alone? Your inner child. And that for anybody who went to Rabbi Yaakov Danishevsky, some of this is from some of what I've learned from his book. I found it on the shelf. What? Attached, which is so remarkable. Rabbi Danishevsky, I encourage everyone to buy it. He wrote a book, Attached, and some of this class will discuss some of what Rabbi Danishevsky talks about. He's a rabbi and a therapist in Chicago. So what he says is, actually what we're talking about is that on Passover, we can say that, that the adult you, the clear, connected adult you has to help your inner child, help the frightened part of you, the part of you that is petrified, the part of you that is stuck, the part of you that doesn't want to feel the pain, that you're responsible for bringing that inner child out of Meitzarim, Mitzrayim or Meitzarim, which are the straits, the emotional constriction. Now that's pretty amazing, and how do we do that? So, like David said today, there is nothing in the Pesach Seder. There are 15 steps to the Seder. David went over them today. There is absolutely nothing that is part of the Seder that doesn't talk to us about the process of healing ourselves. Every part of the Seder teaches us something about extricating ourselves from this feeling of this inability to move from the stuck places that we're in. And I just want to focus on one aspect. So, because David did all 15, and I want to hone in on one aspect because I thought it's just an incredibly powerful thing. If you look at Seder like a human developmental lifespan, the beginning of the Seder, you could consider it almost infancy. And just a bit beyond, you could call it early childhood. And culminating through the entire 15 steps, ultimately leading to the culmination of a person's life. So in the childhood of the Seder, or in the early childhood of the Seder, and if you want to sing the song to remember like what each part of the lifespan of the Seder, you say Kadesh, Orchatz, Karpas. So, and at number 4, so let's say the childhood of the Seder, number 4, we do something so unusual. And there's a lot that's unusual in the Seder, but this is where we want to focus on. We want to look at this unusual ritual that we do during the childhood of the Seder, or the earlier part of the Seder, and we want to understand how it's going to help us, how it's going to help the adult part of us bring the child part of us out of its stuck and hurt places. So the 4th step of the Seder is called Yachatz. So Yachatz is where we take a matzah, we break it in 2, and then we take the smaller part and we put it between the 2 matzahs on the table, and that's the matzah that we're going to eat when it's time to, when it's time to do the mitzvah of matzah. And then we take the other part of the matzah, the bigger part of the matzah, and what do we do with it? Who hides it? The children. If the children aren't there, who hides it? Or you. I mean, think 2021 or whatever, or whenever we were alone, right? So we take we take the larger part of the matzah and we hide it. So this is the one step in the 15 steps of the Seder where there's something going on throughout the entirety of the Seder, where we break it in half, we ultimately are going to eat we're going to eat that smaller part of the matzah, and then we hide the larger part of the matzah. So this is the mitzvah, it's called the Afikomen. And this is the mitzvah of Yachatz. So there's something going on here. It's not totally clear what's happening. And I'd like to give you like a little window into what Yachatz could be understood to be. So Yachatz, first of all, David touched it on a little bit, but immediately we see that something breaks. Something breaks. We're consciously aware of part of it, and then the other part of it is hidden from our view. Now, this concept that something breaks, we're left with a conscious part of it, and then another part is not really available in our consciousness, in our lived reality, it's a very powerful statement about who we are. Because the truth of the matter is, we break. We actually don't break in a physical sense, but something happens to us human beings. Yaakov Danishevsky begins the book by saying, no, Abraham Maslow, who wrote the hierarchy of needs, he doesn't have it right. He has, as the most fundamental needs, food, air, water, shelter. No, it's food, air, water, shelter, and relationships. Human beings are wired for connection and relationships. We're wired to be connected, and we are wired to need something in the earliest stages of our life. And when we don't get it, there's a kind of breaking. I've got real therapists in the room, so I got to be careful here. But when we don't get that, we are absolutely wired for it. Rabbi Danishevsky says in his book, if you ask anybody what's the most important thing, they'll say relationships. But I think he quotes a coach who brought this up. I can't remember his name. He says, imagine there's an alien coming from outer space, and everyone's going to say relationships. What's the most important thing in life? Relationships. So this alien comes from outer space, and he's looking at, he knows nothing about what's important. He knows nothing about what's prioritized in life. And he's looking at everybody's behavior. And And he's just examining everybody's behavior without knowing the importance of relationships. Would he see necessarily by the way people act that relationships are the most important thing? I mean, not always. So we need relationships to thrive. And when we humans are absolutely unique, Judaism, we're unequivocally unique. We're not just smart animals. We are unequivocally unique. But one of the things that makes us so unequivocally unique is that you got 9 months in utero, and then you have 9 months in the world that you're gestating almost to the same degree, meaning your brain and your synapses and your neural circuitry and everything that makes you is being formed in utero and out of utero. Meaning when a little penguin is born or a little sheep is born, they wobble and they get off their feet and then they're independent. Human beings are born with total dependence and they are not fully formed. And the first 9 months of their life outside of utero, their nervous system is regulating according to the stress level of mom. This is not a blame the mother festival. Their whole sense of internal regulation is dependent on mom's level of internal regulation. And then what I think is, the therapists in the room can verify, but what's recognized there is a reality, which was really developed by John, how do you pronounce the name? John Bowlby? By John Bowlby, called attachment theory, which basically means that the way, that the degree to which you are a little child, 10 months, 3 months, 15 months, the way that they receive love, attunement, that the mother, that the parents, that the primary caregivers are attuned to them. They see them. They respond to them. They respond to their needs. They smile when they meet a smile with a smile. They meet crying with caring. To the degree to which the parent is attuned to their needs, and this is really the main point we're going to talk about here, is the degree to which the child is securely or insecurely attached. And when a child is insecurely attached, it makes a big neural print, and they carry those attachments into their adult life. There's a concept in the Torah, it's in Aramaic, but turn the pages, everything is in it. And one of the ideas is turn the pages of the Torah. And when you want to understand the essence of any given concept, look at the first time that word is mentioned in the Torah. You want to know what love is? Go to the first time love is mentioned. You want to know what marriage is? Go to the first time it's mentioned in the Torah. It's not so different. If you want to know how an adult is going to function, how hard they're going to try, how they're going to form relationships, how close they can get, how hard it is to get close, then look at the early attachment of the child. Now, this can be hard for us to hear because we in our own lives, in our own parenting, this is not always easy to talk about attachment, but what's so critical here is that no parent is perfect. And so just by virtue of being alive, there's a certain amount of breaking. What do I mean by breaking? It means that a human being exists in potential, but when their needs aren't met, when their attachment needs aren't totally met, they're going to adapt and change themselves to get their needs met. So what you're going to see in early childhood, you're going to see played out in later life. So you'll see lots of ways of getting love and attention. It might be perfectionism. Maybe you'll see this in one, maybe you guys will see one of these things in yourself. It might be perfectionism. It might be controlling. It might be people pleasing. It might be, you know, rescuing or whatever it is, different ways of being seen, getting love and validation. So these are kind of coping mechanisms or defense mechanisms that keep the inner child from feeling the hurt and the pain. So this is, it sounds very dramatic, but in fact, what's very clear is there's different forms of attachment. And you might, if you're married or if you're in a romantic relationship, you might find this in your relationship. Because while children seek attachment with parent figures, adults also need attachment just as much, and they seek it in their romantic relationship, or they'll seek it in friends or in other social relationships. So it's worth looking, wow, what's going on with me, especially right now when I'm obligated to meet the inner child and bring it out of those stuck places. I need to look, you know, there's like a Southern proverb, I guess you could say. It says, whatever's in your well comes up in your bucket. What does that mean? Whatever's in your well comes up in your bucket. Meaning the triggers you have now, the things that make you act like a child, the things that set you off, even though your adult self knows it's totally inappropriate to scream and yell, or even though your adult self knows it's totally inappropriate to treat X person this way, if you're doing it and it's happening, the best way to, we don't always remember our childhood. A lot of us have very few memories of our childhood, but whatever's in your well comes up in your bucket. And that means that look in your bucket. Look at the things that trigger you. Look at the things that are very hard for you. Look at the ways people tell you you're hard to be in relationship with, and take a look. Take a look at your bucket, and that will help you understand things that you might not be able to consciously look at and say, this was in childhood. This happened in childhood. So Yachatz, what Yachatz comes to tell us is there's a certain breaking that happens to people where they adapt or bend or sort of break off to get the love and attention and acceptance and understanding that they need. and some very often they'll do things that are just simply ways of protecting the hurt part of them. So what we have here, and so on the most simple level, there are different ways of being of struggling with, because we're such relationship. Relationship is the basic need that we have. It's food, things of food and air and water and shelter. That's what it means to be understood, to be acknowledged, to be accepted, to be seen. And when we don't have those, those needs met, we act out just like children. So there's avoidant attachment, there's anxious attachment. And you might find yourself in one of these forms. Avoidant attachment is when you're feeling hurt, when you're feeling misunderstood, you go in, you go inward, you kind of click off your need for attachment. You click off your need for relationship. You stonewall. You get removed. You push it away. And there's anxious attachment. So if avoidant attachment is turning off the desire for attachment, anxious attachment is pretty much anxiously trying to get it, like pushing for it. Like, I feel abandoned. You see me. Hello, does anybody see me? Does anybody hear me? Show me you love me, prove to me you love me. Very often in a marital or in a romantic relationship, anxious will meet avoidant. And so there's a lot to say about this. But I want to go back to Yachatz, because ultimately, Rabbi Danishevsky talks about something really fascinating, which is our lived feeling of how loved we are, or how attuned our primary caregivers are in early childhood, actually plays out in all of the ways we act and all of our relationships in our adult life, but not just with people. It's actually, Rabbi Danishevsky also explains with Hashem, with God. Some of us have an avoidant relationship to God, which is not interested, like sort of closed to the possibility. I know I want something, but it's too vulnerable. And so when I close down to the possibility. And some of us have an anxious relationship to God. And you see this a lot in the Orthodox community, which is, like obsessiveness with doing things perfectly, or like whatever it is. So what Rabbi Danishevsky talks about in his book, and I think it's so beautiful, and I think this is the message of Yachad, and I hope I can say this right, that there's two healings that need to happen, and they coexist. We really need to heal ourselves, and we really need to heal the attachment with God. We need to be what's called securely attached. So if there's avoidant, and there's avoidant is shut down. Anxious is like, see me. So very often in a couple, you'll have one who's like closed down, and the other will be like pushing for connection, pushing to get connection. And sometimes there's, a little bit of both, but not right. So sometimes you'll recognize like, oh yeah, I'm the avoidant, he's the, or she's the, some people will really recognize this. And it's important to understand your style, because once you understand your style, you will be able to understand a little bit of what's going on. Rabbi Danishevsky says it's not just with people. It's that we want to be securely attached to God. We actually want to be securely attached to God. So the whole process of breaking, hiding a piece, and then ultimately, so we've got Yachad is in the childhood of the Seder. And then at the very, very end, you do something really incredible. You find the outfit moment. You pretend, you search for it, and then you do something unbelievable, which is at the very, very end of the Seder, when everything is eaten, when everything is done, you take that afikomen, and nobody talks. You're totally full. You don't want any more matzah. It doesn't matter. Nobody talks, and you eat the entire afikomen. So you've eaten the smaller piece, and now you eat the bigger piece, and you eat the whole afikomen. You're not allowed to talk to anybody. You're not allowed to eat anything after the afikomen. You're not allowed to drink anything except for water. The last taste in your mouth is the ingesting of the whole matzah, of the hurt child in you, of the caring adult in you, of the different parts in you, all taken in and ingested. And by the way, when a person says, I'm too old to do this work, I'm too old to like look deeply inside of myself, you can tell them the afikomen doesn't get eaten until the very end of the Seder's life. And also what that means is that you will have this inner child with you, this hurt inner child, you will have it with you throughout the duration of your life. And it's you don't heal it and never see it again, right? You don't have a drink, you don't take a bite of food. It's almost as if the entire lifespan of the Seder and the last like taste is this healing, which points to the fact that we're meant to be healing throughout the entire lifespan. We are this broken matzah that by nature We are relationship-driven people. We're driven for connection. We're driven for attachment, but nobody's perfect. Some people go through trauma with a capital T. Some people go through smaller traumas, but nobody is able to love exactly the way the human being needs. And so there's always like an insecurity, a breaking, and a sense of insecure attachment in the person. And there's always room for healing. So we take what's very interesting is everything in the Seder is about 4. It's called the Arba Lashonos Shel Geula. That means it's the 4 expressions of the redemption. It's 4 cups of wine. It's 4 questions. Everything is in 4 expressions of redemption. 4 cups of wine, 4 questions. How many matzahs do we? 4 what?
4 sons.
Yes,
4
sorry,
sons.
excuse me, of course, the 4 sons. 3 matzahs. It's only 3 matzahs, but it's not. It's not 3 matzahs. It's 1, 2, 3, and it's the part that we hide. So the redemption of a human being involves their vulnerability. The full expression of a human being involves their healing. If you didn't go down to Egypt, you couldn't go up from Egypt. We are so avoidant of unpleasant feelings. We are so scared of unpleasant feelings. We are so pushing away. Talk to people and you want to share the good stuff, you negate the bad stuff, you don't want to talk about the bad stuff. But there are 4 matzahs. People think there are 3 matzahs. No one can figure out. Everything's in 4s. 4 sons, 4 cups of wine, 4 expressions of redemption, 4 questions. Why are there 3 matzahs? But there aren't. There are 4. The broken 2 are part of the expressions of redemption, and we want there to be 3. We don't want it, but you can't leave in Egypt that you don't go down to. So part of the inner child work, part of meeting this inner child is, first of all, acknowledging that it exists, acknowledging that the inner child is in you. And just in case you're dubious, remember the Southern proverb. Really, what's in your well comes up in your bucket. It's important to look at what's keeping you stuck. You are obligated to bring this inner child out of hiding and do healing work over Pesach, and acknowledging that vulnerability is not something to be avoidant of, that there is no leaving Egypt without entering it. Everyone says, thank you, God, thank you, God, thank you, God, for taking us out of Egypt. But I heard someone say once, yeah, but he put us in there in the first place. So like, it would be like somebody stole $10 from you and then gave it back to you, and you're like, thank you so much for the $10. Yeah, but you stole it in the first place. So God puts us there in the first place. There's a lot to say about that point, but on the simplest level, you can't go out of something that you don't go in. So there are four matzahs. So the first thing is to acknowledge that you have an inner child. Look at your bucket, see what's going on with you. And the second point is to acknowledge that there's a wounded inner child, that there really is a wounded inner child. Now, a lot of people might say, no, I mean, my childhood was fine. It was good. I mean, everyone's got a little neurosis, but it was basically good. But it really is important to understand that you're standing here as an adult and you're reflecting backward. And when you're standing here as an adult, you've got perspective, you've got, you're looking at it from a distance, but imagine it from the life of a child. Imagine it from another place. And there's no blaming anyone here, including yourself. It's very, we're very, very frustrated with ourselves because we're so stuck. I'm sure I'm not alone. I'm sure everything could go up if I asked you, aren't there some things you just can't move beyond? Like you just can't move beyond them. Just like, you think you're done with something and boom, you're right back in. But that's because, there are deeply conditioned beliefs and deeply core beliefs that we carry with us. So the first thing is to understand that we have an inner child. The second thing is to understand that this child is wounded, and then I think what's one of the most powerful things that we can do is to do something really amazing, which is just start to make a little separation between you and your triggered responses. The things that the childlike responses are, to sort of separate from them and start to notice them. Wow, I see my heart's beating. I see my pulse is, I see that I'm like snippy. I see that, I'm stonewalling, I'm turning in, almost to develop like a curiosity without judgment, and a separation, and just, observing, the ability to like start observing yourself as opposed to just being totally locked in. And the last thing I want to say about the inner child is that the greatest, and Rabbi Danishevsky talks about this, the greatest gift we can give our inner child is our adult selves. Because when we were young, we didn't have our adult selves, but now we do. And now our adult selves can tell our wounded inner child, you know what, you worked really hard to be perfect. It takes a lot of energy to be perfect. It's super draining to be perfect, but I know you felt like you had to be perfect. I'm here to tell you now, you don't have to be perfect anymore. You're fine. You're more than fine. You're great the way you are. You don't have to be perfect anymore. Or I know you always feel like everyone's got to be pleased with you, and everyone's got to feel like, you're helping them, and you're who they want you to be. And I know that you played a role, but you know what? As your adult self, I'm here to tell you, you don't have to do that anymore. So I'm just kind of going over it very briefly, but this is the work of the inner child. So I want to end by saying that I think David said that Rabbi Gadi said this. So I'm quoting it in the name of Rabbi Gadi, but I hope I'm right. That ideally, even though it's really hard to break the matzah in exactly the shape you want to break it, like I'm sure you noticed that, but ideally, you're supposed to break it in, so you've got this matzah, this whole matzah, and you're supposed to break it one piece that looks like almost like a vav, which is a line, and the other piece, you're supposed to break it like a dalet, so like this. So like a dalet goes like this, and a vav goes like this. So ideally, I don't know if you're going to be successful in this, but you're meant to break it in this. The bigger piece is meant to like curve over a little bit. Good luck. So why? So you got a vav and a dalet, right? Because if you, I don't have a board here, but if you take a vav and you take a dalet and you put it together and you break them in two, you have the letter He, which is the letter of God. The brokenness ingested within you, doing the work of bringing yourself out of your Meitzarim, understanding that brokenness is truly part of life, and that you don't have to be ashamed that you're in the same stuck place that you've been for so long. It's part of life, and there's a healing process that we need to do all the time, but especially at this moment of yachas. So ideally we break it into like a dalet and a vav, which together form the letter He, because He represents the name of God. And the main point is this: we are very, We're deeply, deeply affected by the time of life we have no conscious memory of. And that's hard for us to understand this. Seriously, I don't have a single memory. 18 months, 15 months, 10 months, seriously? But those attachments form a child's way of coping and form a child's way of acting in the world. And as the child matures, they manifest the kind of circuitry, if you will, that they formed in the earliest years. We actually play out in our relationships, the anxious attachment. See me, just I feel like you're leaving me. Do you see me? Do you like I feel like show me proof. Show me proof that you love me. Or I'm feeling really flooded, I'm feeling really vulnerable. I'm just gonna turn off. I'm gonna like turn off it, right? We will play that out into adulthood, and we will play it out in our most significant relationships. And we will play it out in the way we relate to God. Do we relate to like God as like, I have so much like anger and difficult feelings that I'm just gonna shut down? Or do we get like perfectionist and controlling, like if I just get straight A's for God, you know, if I just lose weight for God, if I'm just perfect for God, maybe God will love me, because maybe love was conditional when we were younger. So it's all connected. And I want to end by saying that the way you relate to yourself, the thing about human beings that's the most important to understand is that change is unbelievably difficult, but it's also profoundly possible. And that is the paradox of free choice. I would go so far as to say we really do not have free choice. I know Judaism talks all the time about free choice. I would go so far as to say we don't have free choice if we don't consciously do work like I'm surfacing tonight. If we don't do that, then we're basically just being guided and dictated by behaviors that are based on beliefs that we formed when we were very young. Let's see. So in other words, we started to believe certain things when we were very young. I'm not good enough, I'm not important, nobody listens to me, I'm not cherished, I'm not smart enough. And we will actually, our behaviors will be guided by those beliefs, be governed by those beliefs. We will actually use our brain to filter out things that oppose those beliefs. We'll make those beliefs come true. You see, I'm not smart enough. We'll find evidence for it. If we, and I would go so far as to say, no, we really don't have free choice if we're not conscious. We don't do conscious work. We are basically just guided by old beliefs that we formed when we were children and we couldn't really make sense of the world. It's very important to understand that. When you're a child, and I'm going to end now, but I just want to say that when you are a child can't say, you know, mom and dad, they also are coming from their own traumas, you know, like they've got a lot to work out. Child can't, if a child said that, it would be equivalent of like, I am underwater and I've got, you know, my oxygen tank and there's just a little hole in it. It's fine. A child can't say that. So instead they say, it must be me. It must be something that I did. And then they extrapolate, it must be the world. But a child can't say, you know what, mom went through a really tough experience herself. She says it must be me. And I think that you could ask certain people in this room who talk to people a lot, they will tell you they'll speak to people who are 70, 75, 80, 60, 50, that are still carrying the beliefs that they formed when they were young children. And they're using their brains to filter out things that don't support those beliefs, and they actually manifest those beliefs. So do people have free choice? Judaism says yes, but there's a caveat, but you have to be conscious. You have to do conscious work. What? You have to be self-aware, and you have to do conscious work. And if you don't, you're really just a prisoner of your reactions. And so we are a paradox. We really, change is the hardest thing in the world, but we are profoundly capable of doing it. You know, an animal can't do that, but a human can. So I want to end by saying that, that we eat the afikomen, right? We find the afikomen, we find the hidden parts, we find what's hidden. And the last thing that we do is we ingest the matzah of the 3, and then the 4th matzah, which is the half matzah that we broke. We don't just, you're totally stuffed. You don't want to eat it. It's really important. If you do anything different this Pesach, eat the whole afikomen. You take the ground matzah, or maybe you use the square. You take it and you break it, and at the end, when it says to eat it. And don't eat anything afterwards. Don't have a lollipop after. Don't have a Dunkin' Donuts. Oh, definitely don't have a Dunkin' Donuts. Don't have a lollipop afterwards. Don't have a glass of juice afterwards.
Why?
Let it sit in your mouth, because the together, the vav and the hey, which we're going to try when we try to break the matzah in that way, form the vav and the dalet, form the letter hey. And Rabbi Danishevsky's point I'm going to leave you with, which is it's all the same. The more you work on being secure within yourself, the more you'll have a secure relationship with God. What does a secure relationship with God mean? It's at the very end of his book. The very, very last paragraph of his book was something like this. Sometimes I'll try and I'll do the best that I can, and I'll know you love me. And sometimes I won't do the best that I can, and I know you love me. And sometimes I'll really won't do the best that I can, and I'll still know you love me. And I'll know that I can talk to you, and I know that you'll always hear me. And I know that I'll rebel against you, and I'll run away from you, and you'll always be there for me. You'll always be waiting for me. And I know your love for me is not like a human love. And I know the love is totally real, and I am securely attached to you. That's why, that's the root of the breaking. It's the root of the hiding. It's the root of the ingesting. It's the root of the eating, and nothing comes after it. Because nothing is more important than relationships. When we don't get the relationship needs that human beings have, it affects our life very deeply. And we have to spend our life healing the part of us that is very, very hurt. And healing the part of us that kind of broke off, started to adapt and act in ways to get that love. We take all that matzah and together we eat it. And then we say, when it's all over, David said, nirtza. What does nirtza mean? It's passive. It means accepted. Accepted. So the last word is nirtza, and we say, L'shana haba Yerushalayim. By the way, if you live in Yerushalayim, what do you say? What? No, well, that's the dreidel. But what are you, wrong holiday? No, the Shana Haba Yerushalayim Habaniyah. That's what you say. Next year in a rebuilt Jerusalem. So what do you do if you live in Jerusalem? Yeah, that's right. Les said rebuild it. That's really true. But you still say next year in Jerusalem, because we're not there yet. We're not healed yet. We're not in a rebuilt Jerusalem. We're in the redemptive process, but it's all connected. Your needs for attachment, your what's in your bucket, what's coming out, how to heal it, how it manifests in your love for God, how it manifests in the process of the redemption of the Jewish people. It's all together. Don't run away from the pain. Don't be ashamed that you're still stuck in the same self-sabotaging behavior that you were when you were 17. Don't be embarrassed about anything. Just embrace the healing process and eat your matzah. What? No, I know it's a social time, but I know I really said a lot, so I do want to take questions or insights in here. The down dog. It is. Everybody. Yeah, so you take the afikomen and then break it, everyone eats a piece of the afikomen, yeah. But make sure you do, and don't eat anything afterwards, that's, yeah, yes, left, yes.
I just wanted to. Basically, what happens, God cares about playground includes all. So what's the shame is, we are born with a defect that is actually good. Because that is our trigger that allows us to find.
We're born and we're gonna be defective. We're not born with a defect, but we're born and it's going to happen that we're going to be defective.
And I think that's a liberating thought when you stop and consider it. It's the mostly
Yeah.
That's why you think
Yeah, that's right. We're born not born with a defect, but we're born with the inevitability that we're gonna go to Mitzrayim. Yeah, okay, yeah.
It's guaranteed that we're born in perfect. There's no purpose.
Yeah.
Purpose.
Yes,
To our life.
yes, yes, that's right. Yes.
Do you read my review once?
Yeah. It does. I was gonna, okay, so you want to. Okay, so Steve is asking me to bring up something that I shared in an article that I wrote. The idea of the Japanese art of Musubi. It's actually a really amazing thing. Most of you have probably heard of this, but so there is this concept that you take a beautiful bowl. You take a beautiful bowl and you crack it in many, many pieces. You take all the pieces and you take golden liqueur and you combine all the pieces back together in a bowl that's more valuable and more beautiful once it's been repaired. And do you hear that? That's Mitsubi. You take a gorgeous bowl, crack it, bring it back together with gold filigree, and the gold and the gold becomes more beautiful and valuable than before it had been cracked. So we live in a culture that's obsessed with the whole bowl. I mean, just look at social media. It's the whole bowl. And how are you doing? And when you hear something that's not good, oh, that's terrible, right? We live in a whole bowl aspiration consciousness. Like we're after the whole bowl. But the broken bowl, once it's been repaired, is more valuable. In other words, the Jewish people were realized only once they were in and then out of Egypt. Same thing with you. And yeah, I mean, there's a lot to say, but that is a beautiful metaphor for thank you for what we're talking about. And it helps you also not be so scared of the vulnerable feelings. By the way, all the stuff that we do, all the stuff, the perfectionism, maybe you're a people pleaser, maybe you're, controller or rescue, everyone's kind of got their thing. It's all about not feeling the vulnerabilities. So you I think it's Rabbi Danishevsky in his book, he's a body therapist, he's a somatic therapist. So like, in other words, you're feeling where things are in your body. So sometimes somebody will start, tapping or scratching their skin or, whatever it is. So he says to them, he's talking something difficult with them. And he's like, I see you're tapping. I want you to stop the tapping and feel it. Just feel it. And that's very hard for people to do. Because we have a lot of physical things we do and emotional things we do to not feel the pain. So if you're struggling with like, why do I in my graduate course, there was this woman, she said, I'm like 53 years old or whatever, and she says, now we get grades. So every week we get our grades. Like, I got a B one time, I got a B minus one time, I got an A one time, right? She said, like, if I don't get a perfect grade, I get really like anxious. So, so that would be like, oh, this is in my bucket. I can't. So all those behaviors, I call them ego defenses or coping mechanisms, they're all designed to not feel vulnerable, to not feel the vulnerability of the inner child. But now we know that's the work that we do. Yeah, sure.
I was just thinking about the.
Please correct anything that was.
I was thinking about the crash goal. What is that ability? It makes it better than what it's. And that's really the connections that you make. That you become more whole, that others are with you, and that becomes who you become is that positive.
Yes, you're calling the vulnerability, the connections that we make with people. Beautiful. Just and anybody else? So just giving us all a blessing that we should ingest the full afikomen, the full matzah, that there are not 3 matzahs, there are 4. The brokenness is an integral part of what makes it 4. And I guess I would say to you, just think about one thing you want to bring from this, because we brought in a lot, but just think of one thing you want to bring. Maybe it's an emotional, like, wow, I don't have to be so rejecting of myself when I'm struggling with things. Or maybe you want to be careful about the afikomen this year. Whatever it is, think about one thing that you heard and try to ingest it, or as Les says, make it a little part of your essence. If we had more time, we could hear ideas, but maybe someone wants to say something. But everyone should have a hot touch of a. We should truly. This year, we are obligated, we should know that we're obligated not just to imagine ourselves as if we have been in Egypt, but we should heal ourselves from our stuck places, our mitzarim. And that is like an obligation, and it's a privilege, and it's a life well lived. So we just give us all something that we should ingest it. We should experience it this year.
All right, good night, everyone. Talk to me.
So.